Hi everyone. Thanks for bearing with me during lunchtime. I know everyone's hungry. I have some gifts in my presentation, if that's at all exciting during lunchtime. All right, so again, my name is Anna Saraceno. I am a product designer at Trello. I'm going to move this chair so I'm not turning my back to you during my presentation. Okay, so I am here to talk to you about how to sell the value of design within your company or organization without having to give a pitch. This is kind of a condensed version of a talk that I gave at a High Alpha offsite earlier this year. This is actually, I just met Ron earlier today, but this is kind of directly off of his presentation, so that was definitely a good segue. Before I get into things, I'm going to talk briefly about my journey. As you can see here, I've been at a lot of different types of organizations. I've spent most of my career as an in-house UX and product designer. I've been part of a design team of hundreds of designers for a global company. I've also been a design team of one person at a startup. I've also done some freelance work with design agencies here in Indianapolis. So what I'm about to talk to you about today is based on my own experience as mostly as an in-house UX and product designer, and I'm excited to kind of share what I have learned. So before I get into solutions, I'm going to dive into the problem space because that's what we do as designers, right? We talk about the problems first. So why is it so hard to sell the value of design? Most designers that I've talked to, this is kind of a common thread throughout all of our experience, especially for in-house product and UX designers. We have a hard time kind of evangelizing design within our organizations. We have a hard time telling the story of why what we do is so valuable. We have a hard time getting the time and the resources and kind of the spotlight that we need to do our work well. Why is that so hard? Based on my experiences, there are some main reasons for this. First of all, designers are put in a bucket. So there have been so many times throughout my career where I'm working with a team and we start on a project and we're talking about what everybody's going to do next, and somebody on my team, whether it's a product manager or someone else, says, and then Anna will go make it look pretty. And that always makes me cringe because, you know, that's part of what I'm doing, but that's not all of what I'm doing. I bring so much more value to the table. If they were accurately describing what I think I was doing, they would say, and then Anna will strategically implement a user-centered, iterative process to identify and prioritize problems, explore and test many possible solutions, then recommend one or more usable, elegant, beautiful solutions that not only exceeds user expectations, but also provides moments of delight. But they never, thank you. But they don't usually describe what designers do like that, surprisingly. So we are very well known for our tactical skills, but the soft skills that we bring to the table and our strategic thinking, we're not often well known for that. So that's kind of a problem when we're trying to prove our value within a company. Along the same lines, designers are not often well integrated into the rest of the business. We're kind of in our own silo on our design teams. So for those of you who are designers within a company, here are some questions to think about. How well integrated are you into your business? Where do you sit, and how often do you work with or near other people who aren't on your direct design or product or dev team? How often do you actually work with people in other parts of the company? How well do you understand the onboarding process for new customers? And how well do you understand the sales process and what happens when a customer goes through sales and then starts using your product or service? And furthermore, how well do you demonstrate that understanding when you are doing your design work and when you're telling the story of your design work? Do you demonstrate that you understand the journey that customers go through with your business? How well do you understand marketing? What are the different marketing touch points that your customers go through? And how do they jump between those marketing touch points and the product that you work on? So customers aren't only using the product that you're designing, they're also getting emails from your company. They're going to your company's website. They're going to your company's Facebook page and whatever else is out there. How well, as a designer, are you demonstrating your understanding that your company has a journey before they get into your product and after they leave your product? This is a super important one. How well do you understand how your company makes money? And furthermore, how well are you demonstrating that when you are telling the story of your design work? How thoughtful are you about how what you're designing is going to make money for your company? And finally, how well do you understand the competitive landscape? Are you familiar with the competitors that you're up against? Are you familiar with what your company does better than them? Are you familiar with what your product, like kind of where your product loses out? And again, how well are you demonstrating this when you're doing your design work and when you're telling the story of your design work? So these are all examples of ways you can think about, how integrated am I into the rest of the business? Another thing we're up against is the designer persona. This is kind of a stereotype, but I still think it's something that we struggle against. So everybody's kind of familiar with like the designer stereotype. So a pretentious, kind of stubborn person who's unwilling to compromise about that one pixel. Basically somebody who's seen as kind of unhelpful and only out to kind of carry out their own ideas. Someone who thinks that design belongs with the design team, no one else should be a designer, quick to amplify their own ideas, and also quick to tell other people why their ideas are not as good. The designer persona uses a lot of UX jargon, a lot of design jargon, and then judges other people for not understanding it, like, can't believe you don't know what a journey map is, and like stuff like that. So I think we're still kind of up against the designer persona stereotype. This one is interesting. Design thinking has become a very popular term, a very popular process, both within design and within business as a whole. And I think that in some ways this is a very positive thing. I think this has encouraged really good processes around getting to the heart of really complex problems and having really human-centered processes for solving those problems. At the same time, I feel like there's kind of this phenomenon of, like, I read an article on Medium about design thinking, and now, like, I know what to do. I don't really need a designer because, like, I read an article about it. So in some ways, I feel like this huge popularity of design thinking in some ways kind of devalues designers. There's also a lack of value placed on research. So as designers and as researchers, we know there are a lot of nuances and a lot of complexities to research processes. But often companies, and especially people in product, have this mindset that, all we need to do, we need to go out, we need to ask the customers what they want, they're going to tell us what they want, and we're going to build it, and we're going to give it to them, and it's that easy, and we're going to make a bunch of money. But we all know that's not always how it goes. Customers don't always know what they want. You don't just kind of take what they want for face value. And a lot of times this lack of value on user research is something that also devalues designers. And finally, bad first impressions. So if you think about it, most of the people in your company only really know how to talk about the value of design based on experiences that they've had with designers in the past, or without designers in the past if they've never worked with designers before. So if they've had a bad experience with a designer or a design team in the past, or if the company has never had designers before and they feel like they're getting by just fine, that's kind of an uphill battle to fight because they already have this kind of negative first impression of designers. There are probably many other reasons why it's difficult to sell the value of design within an organization. These are some of the big ones from my experience. So what can we do about it? The great news is that we can do a lot about it, and that's so exciting. But I want to share a few observations first. So, true fact number one. The value of our work is not inherent in our tactical deliverables. And I think this is really important for us to keep in mind as designers because our tactical deliverables like wireframes, high-fidelity mock-ups, prototypes, all of those beautiful things that we are producing, These are the things that often get us really quick recognition and oohs and ahs and everything, but our tactical deliverables alone don't tell the story of how they're going to improve the lives of our customers. They don't tell the story of how they are going to help our business reach those metrics that we're trying to reach. All of these things kind of surrounding the tactical deliverables is what the designer should be bringing to the table. And true fact number 2, you, as a designer, directly influence how your colleagues view the value of design. So your colleagues are likely not going to go out and start reading books about design or reading case studies about how valuable UX and product design is. Maybe they will. That would be awesome. But they are looking at you as the designer to show them what is the value of design. What's the value of having a design team in your company? So what you do as a designer, how you communicate, and how you help an organization and how you help a business is going to directly influence how your colleagues view the value of design. And that's a huge responsibility, but it's also super exciting. So what I am recommending here is stepping outside of your traditional design role and supercharging your soft skills. And I'm going to go through some ways that you can do this. But I wanted to do a side note because a lot of times when I hear people start talking about soft skills, or when I see an article about like how important soft skills are, I kind of do like an eye roll, like, ooh, soft skills, like be a good listener, be empathetic. Like soft skills are basically just like be a decent human being to other human beings. So I get it, but the soft skills that I'm going to talk about in particular are soft skills that I've found that, you know, I've had to really develop along the way and that have helped me as a designer in my own job and have helped me kind of really prove the value of design within my organization. So these are the things I'm going to go through: synthesize, amplify, integrate, be proactive, and set the right tone. So starting off with synthesize. So kind of the generic soft skill would be a good listener, right? But as designers, we are not only good listeners, but what we're actually good at doing is not only listening, but taking all of that information that we've listened to, taking all of the data that we have access to, and synthesize it into meaningful insights and helping other people understand these huge kind of bodies of information. And there are ways that we can not only do that within our design jobs, but kind of step outside of our traditional design jobs and help synthesize information and data for the rest of the company. So an example of this would be if your team is working on figuring out, you know, what's the next most important problem to solve? Or we have kind of this big overarching problem. How do we break it down into something more specific and something more measurable? That's not necessarily something that typically falls within the job of a UX designer or a product designer, but because we're so good at taking a whole bunch of information and synthesizing it down into really meaningful insights, we can help businesses with these other problems. Another example of synthesis that I actually do a lot in my job is during meetings. So I will sketch note, I will get up and whiteboard during meetings, or I will just take notes on my computer or in a notebook. And oftentimes in meetings, especially particularly, you know, complex or stressful meetings, there's a lot of information going back and forth. And I found that a lot of times we end meetings and everybody thinks we're on the same page, but we're not on the same page. So something that I do is I take all the information I recorded from a meeting and I synthesize all that information and I share out kind of the high-level takeaways from that meeting and I share with my team. And whenever I do that, people are just so appreciative. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did this. Yay, hooray, designers, hooray. So this is something that designers are super good at, and it's something really easy that you can do that's not necessarily a typical designer thing, but you're really good at it as a designer. Next is amplify. So this is about keeping an open design mind and amplifying other people's ideas. Ideas don't just live with designers. Designers should want to be seen as somebody who helps build the best ideas for the solution, regardless of where they come from. And don't let other people's good ideas make you feel insecure. So there have been so many times where I've spent a few weeks working on a problem, and I go through my awesome design process, and I'm like, yes, this is the best solution for the problem. Everyone's going to be so excited about it. And then I present it to a room full of people, and some random person in the room, like a front-end developer or something, raises their hand and says, have you considered doing this instead? And it's a way better solution than what I came up with. And they came up with it in 2 minutes. And, of course, as a, human being, my first reaction is like, grumble, grumble, grumble. How come they came up with a better solution? But to be seen as a valuable designer in my organization, what I need to do in those situations is to say, hey, that's actually an awesome solution. I hadn't considered it. What can I do to help amplify that idea, to help build out that idea so that we can move forward with the best solution to the problem? So again, bring all good ideas to life. And something else that we are good at as designers, or that we work on throughout our career, is good critique skills. There are many different ways to run critique sessions. We could probably have a whole talk about that. But find ways to teach critique to other people in your company. Critique sessions don't just have to be limited to design work. You can run a critique session on a problem you're trying to solve. You can run a critique session on a research plan. You can run a critique session on a business strategy. You can run it on anything. So these critique skills that we learn as designers, we can help the rest of our company use them to run their processes better as well. And finally, assume good intent. This is one of our main values at Trello, and this is something that has really helped me along the way. So when I first started off in design, one of the things that pissed me off the most was when a product manager would come to me and they would say, hey, Anna, I made these wireframes in PowerPoint, and I think we should use them. What do you think? And I would just be like, that's my job. But you know what? What the product owner was actually trying to do was they were really excited about the problem we were trying to solve, and they were trying to get their ideas out of their head. So they had good intent. They weren't trying to take over my job or anything. They were just trying to collaborate to solve the problem together. So always assume good intent. Integrate. Find ways to integrate design into the rest of the business. Designers always get so excited about talking about their design process. This is my design process. What's your design process? And that's great. It's important to talk about the design process. But design isn't the process. Design is a process within a business that has about 1 million other processes going on. So how can we find ways to integrate the design process into the rest of the business? One of the ways we can do this is to shadow other roles regularly, especially customer-facing roles, whether it's support or sales or marketing or customer success. And if we observe these roles with a helpful eye, meaning, I'm observing support. Maybe there are ways that as a designer, there are things I can do in my job to kind of help the support role. These are ways we can better integrate into our business. A bonus kind of side effect of shadowing other roles regularly is you identify internal stakeholders that you can do internal research on and internal usability testing on. Also tell the story of how your design work fits into the rest of the business. So when we present our design work, a lot of times we focus on, this is why this design is best for our users, which is important. That's our number one focus, is the users. We are user experience designers. But also think of ways to show that you've been thoughtful about how this design is best for the business. Talk about how this design particularly rolls up to a specific metric that your business is trying to hit. Talk about ways that you can integrate some form of upsell within this design so that there's potential for your company to make a little bit more money. Show that you're actually thoughtful, that if your company isn't making money, you don't have a job as a designer. Be proactive. Don't wait for permission. If you're really excited about a specific problem or a specific idea, do what you can to move forward on it. to a certain extent. Don't let it compromise the regular project work that you're doing that you're working on. But don't wait for someone higher up to come ask you to do it, because they probably won't. One of my favorite things to do is to kind of design blue sky concepts. So every day I'm kind of in the weeds of what does my product look like next quarter or the quarter after. But a lot of times I like to step back and start thinking about what does this product look like in 5 years. And that's always really exciting because there aren't very many constraints. But what's so important about defining a future vision is then taking a step back and defining what are the steps that we're going to take to get there, so that when you define, your blue sky vision, you're showing you're also being thoughtful that, we are part of a business. We have constraints that we need to think about, but here are the steps that I think we can take to get there. And finally, treat your process as an experiment. Be proactive about trying new ways of working. Be proactive about trying new ways of collaborating with different teams within your company. Even if you're a junior designer and just starting out, people aren't going to ask you to try new things. You need to be proactive about trying new things. And if you're seen as somebody who is trying new ways of working to improve how the company works as a team, you will be seen as somebody who is very valuable to the company. And finally, set the right tone. This is something that I have learned as I've grown into more leadership positions within design. Obviously, attitudes are contagious. So if you have a negative attitude about difficult situations, this bleeds into the rest of your team. Especially if you're leading a design team with junior designers, they're going to look at you for how they should respond to difficult situations. So you're going to prove your value if you head into really difficult situations with a positive attitude and you keep your team moving forward. Finally, this is some of the best advice I've ever received from a mentor. Stay helpful, stay humble. Designers should always be seen as helpful. They should always be seen as humble. The design team should always be a team that the rest of the company looks to for help, for helping to define problems, for helping to solve problems, for helping to innovate. They shouldn't be seen as a roadblock. They shouldn't be seen as difficult to work with. So constantly be thinking about, how you communicate, how you go about doing your work, and are you seen as a helpful person and a helpful team. So the last thing I want you to think about, as a designer, you research users, you solve their problems, you provide moments of delight. Why not do that with your colleagues? So my main message here is that we have so many unique skills as UX designers, as product designers, as researchers, and these skills are not only great within the work that we're doing, but if we transfer them outside of the design role to the rest of the company, to the rest of the business, it will help us prove our value within our organizations. And that's all. Thank you.
Though I missed a few part of that conversation, but I really enjoyed some of the other areas you mentioned, especially how you can help amplify stuff and also synthesize. While you're doing some of this, how are you making sure that you're not stepping into other people's roles as well, so that they don't feel like you're not staying in your lane or something like that? Though, depending on the environment you are, if you're in an agile team that is cross-functional, some people wouldn't mind, but how can you also be sure that you're not overreaching?
That's a great question, and that's definitely a problem that I have seen teams run into before. I would say definitely err on the side of over-communication. There are a lot of activities and processes that you can run within your team to kind of get to know your team better and to set expectations. There are different types of designers, there are different types of product managers, there are different types of engineers and engineering managers. I've worked with product managers who want to be incredibly collaborative and want my feedback and input on the roadmap. And I've worked with product managers who feel that they own the roadmap and design should be more of just kind of an external supporting role. So in terms of not stepping on feet, again, I would just err on the side of over communication. I said being proactive is important, but not to the extent where you're kind of going rogue and trying to do somebody else's job without communicating with them first.
Hi. I really like the point you made in the integrate session. You said design is not the process; it's a process, part of the big picture of the business and the company. So how did you balance your own way of thinking, design thinking, into the company's process? And also, different companies have different design process. It's kind of complicated. How did you balance your own process versus the company's design process, and then also the company's bigger business process?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it, you made a good point, is that every company works a little bit differently. So when I start a new job, I spend at least the first 3 months just kind of in learning and observation mode. I don't go in thinking I'm gonna change things around here. I'm gonna I know better than everyone here, so I'm gonna change the way everybody works. I spend my first few months just really getting to know what processes everybody is using, whether it's other designers, whether it's the dev team, whether it's how product works, whether it's how the whole company works. And in terms of integrating, a design process into that, again, it's just about communicating with people. What has worked well in the past with working with designers? What hasn't worked so well? What can I learn from your past processes? So it's all just kind of making sure that you are learning from what has happened in the past and kind of building on top of that.
Thank you.
So, so in regards of the whole process, you speak about it from the design aspect and working with business in a sense. So seeing that it's so many different processes out there, waterfall, agile, safe agile, lean UX, as a designer, how do you translate that information from being a designer from the business side, then going over to the system dev side?
What do you mean translate the information?
Well, in order to set the tone for the overall arching of the business or the effort that you're actually doing, again, the end game or the execution is around that of the development side of it. So the designing aspects of it, what are some of the key takeaways you can actually design for or help them identify so it isn't an issue?
So I would say, there is the business side of things, there's the design side of things, there's the dev side of things. I would say that representation from every side of things should be involved at pretty much every point in the process, so that there's not so much of a handoff between different disciplines. I think there should be developers involved up front when we're talking product strategy, business strategy. I think there should be product involved at the end when things are being built out. A lot of times, when I am designing or when I am kind of exploring a problem space, I involve developers so that they have an understanding and kind of buy-in into the product space, into the problem that we're trying to solve, so that it's not as much of kind of a big handoff, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, thank you.